My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 33 years old, born in Norfolk, Virginia. Navy blood runs through my veins. My grandfather served in the Pacific. My father fixed planes on carriers. And I command people. Or at least, I'm supposed to. That morning, I buttoned my dress whites with hands that didn't feel like mine. There's a strange kind of silence that settles in just before something big happens. Not fear, not pride, just quiet, like the stillness before a missile hits. Outside, the heat of late summer curled over the base, flags barely stirred. Everything looked calm, expected, ordinary. Inside the hall, every seat was filled. Rows of uniforms, whites, greens, even a few deep blues from other branches, like a sea of pressed shoulders and judgmental eyes. The ceremony was formal, yes, but it was also personal. I wasn't just being promoted, I was being handed a command most people only dreamed of: strategic planning for the Pacific Fleet. That kind of role meant power, influence. It meant being trusted at the highest level. But as I stood there, hands locked behind my back, eyes fixed ahead, something felt off. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was history. They called my name. Applause rose. I stepped forward. My CO smiled. My mouth moved. A rehearsed thank you speech I'd gone over 100 times in my head. I barely heard myself. Then, just before I reached the stage, a voice cut through the room, sharp, familiar, unwelcome. Rachel! It wasn't a greeting, it was a charge, a warning, and then I saw her. Lena, my younger sister, her hair shorter than I remembered, face tighter, jaw set with something that wasn't grief, but had lived beside it for a long time. I froze. I swear, the air did too. She pushed through the rows. Someone tried to stop her. A petty officer, maybe. But she moved like she had every right in the world to be there. And then, in front of 100 officers, dignitaries, and my entire command, she walked straight up to me and slapped me across the face. Not lightly, not hesitantly, like it had been building in her hand for years, like she'd come there just to make sure I felt it. The room gasped, uniforms stiffened, someone knocked over a chair. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't even breathe. I tasted blood at the corner of my mouth. My ear rang. She stared at me. Her voice shook, but it was clear. You left us. You left me. All of this glory parade, none of it makes you who you think you are. My vision blurred, not from tears, from shock. I hadn't seen her in 6 years, not since I'd walked out of a Virginia hospital after our mother's last relapse and never looked back. Not since I'd chosen the Navy over the mess our family had become. Someone shouted. A Marine moved toward her, but before anyone could act, another voice rang out. Firm. Controlled. Dangerous. If anyone touches her again, you answer to me. The voice didn't belong to my CO. It didn't belong to anyone in my direct chain of command. It belonged to Captain Jacob Rains. Naval Intelligence. Bronze Star. Man of few words and fewer emotions. He stepped forward from the back of the room like he'd been waiting. Like he knew this moment would come. And then, to the absolute confusion of every officer in the hall, he said, "She's my wife." My heart stopped. So did the room. It was a lie, a deliberate, calculated, impossible lie. But in that moment, when everything felt like it was shattering, it was also the first time I felt someone standing between me and the chaos. Lena laughed, or maybe scoffed, her voice cracked with bitterness. Of course. That's what you do, Rachel. You collect people, medals, men, lies. She turned and walked out. No one followed. The door closed behind her, and the room sat in stunned, electrified silence. I didn't say a word. I didn't chase her. I didn't deny the lie. I just stood there, blood drying on my lip, ears ringing, my body rigid with shame I refused to show. They never finished the ceremony. No one clapped. The applause that had started for me had died somewhere on that floor, and still, I stood. Because that's what I do. I stand. Even when everything inside me is screaming to disappear. The slap faded before the bruise even formed, but the weight of it lingered like fog in my lungs. People didn't look at me the same way after that. Not directly. Some offered polite nods or forced small talk in passing. Others just avoided eye contact altogether, as if shame was contagious. That night, I sat alone in my quarters, still in my uniform, the collar stiff, the fabric sharp at the seams. A perfect fit for someone I didn't recognize anymore. My jaw ached, though I wasn't sure if it was from the strike or from how hard I'd been clenching it since. There was a knock at the door. Not a text. Not a call. A knock. Old school. Purposeful. I didn't answer right away. Whoever was on the other side didn't knock again. When I opened the door, Captain Rains stood there, still in uniform, arms folded behind his back, his expression unreadable. He didn't ask if he could come in. He didn't have to. I stepped aside. He walked in like he'd been there before, like he belonged. Which, of course, he didn't. I closed the door quietly. Why? I asked. He turned, his eyes meeting mine for the first time, not across a conference table, but up close. They were colder than I remembered. Not unkind, just deeply trained to see what others missed. You needed cover, he said simply. I didn't need a lie. You didn't stop me from telling it. He wasn't wrong. The room felt small with him in it, too bright, too exposed. You put your name on my life, Jacob. He raised an eyebrow. I put weight behind your dignity when no one else moved a muscle. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. He looked around the room. Spartan. Regulation. 2 pictures on the desk. One of me in fatigue standing in front of a helicopter, and one of me and Lena from over a decade ago, back when smiles were easier and life didn't feel like a chessboard. She's angry, he said, nodding toward the photo. But that wasn't just anger. That was old grief. Don't profile her, I snapped, sharper than intended. He didn't react. Of course he didn't. Naval intelligence officers don't flinch. I'm not profiling her. I'm trying to figure out why you didn't react. My spine stiffened. What was I supposed to do? Tackle her? Return the slap? Scream in front of everyone? He stepped closer, but not threateningly, just deliberately. You could have left. I stared at him, jaw tight. And prove her right? Something flickered in his expression then, not quite approval. Something closer to understanding. He gave a small nod, almost to himself. You're being reassigned. My stomach dropped. Excuse me? To Washington. Joint Strategic Leadership Program. Civilian and cross-branch integration. You've been on the shortlist for months. I didn't apply. I did. I stared at him like he'd spoken in another language. You had no right. No, he said. I didn't. But I knew the Navy would need to make a move after today. I gave them a good one. I felt heat rising in my chest. You don't get to decide where I go. I didn't. I just opened a door before someone else closed it. My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. He started toward the door, then paused. The position's yours. If you want it, you'll be working with Air Force, Army, State Department analysts. Big picture stuff. Real impact. And if I say no? You stay here, answer awkward questions, wait for the next headline to eat you alive. He opened the door, then turned back one last time. For what it's worth, Lieutenant Commander, I didn't lie to protect you. I lied because no one should stand alone when they've already bled for everyone else. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. I stood there, breathing like I'd just run 5 miles uphill. I didn't sleep that night. But I did start packing. Washington didn't feel like a promotion. It felt like exile. The sky here was a different kind of gray. Polished, institutional, as if even the weather wore a uniform. I arrived at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling 3 days after the ceremony that hadn't ended, carrying 2 duffel bags, a folder of classified clearance, and a story no one dared ask me to explain. The strategic leadership program was exactly what Captain Rains had said it would be. Elite, intense, and full of the kind of people who said ma'am with a smile they didn't mean. I was the only woman from the Navy. One of only 3 people under 40, the only one with a visible scar. And I was pretty sure I was the only one who had been publicly slapped by a sibling in full dress whites on a stage. No one mentioned it. But they all knew. They knew something had happened. They just didn't know what. Rumors float faster than orders. Some said it was a family dispute. Others whispered about a jealous ex. One junior Air Force major even asked me if it was a protest against military policies. Like my sister had come to make a statement. I didn't correct him. Let them guess. There was no point in correcting stories when I wasn't sure how to tell the truth anymore. The program was structured into simulations, joint briefings, and strategic games. Civilian analysts sat beside 4-star protégés. Former CIA consultants debated airfield logistics with Coast Guard commanders. We were supposed to think big, globally, identify patterns of conflict, anticipate threats, manage alliances, but all I could think about was Lena and the letter she hadn't sent. Every day I checked my inbox. Nothing. No email. No voicemail. No apology. Not even another slap. Just silence, which somehow was worse. Until one afternoon, 5 weeks into the program, I returned to my on-base housing to find a small, unmarked envelope tucked beneath my door. Not military issue. No stamps. Just my name, in handwriting that hadn't touched my life in 6 years. I opened it with fingers that felt numb. I didn't come there to humiliate you. I came because I couldn't stand the idea that the world would clap for you without knowing what it cost everyone else. I sank onto the edge of the bed. My knees felt hollow, but I was wrong. Not because I think you made the right choices, but because I never really saw how much it cost you too. There was no signature, just one last line in smaller, tighter handwriting. I've started therapy. I don't know who I am without the anger. I'm trying to find out. I read it 3 times. Then again, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my ribbons. That night, in a simulation about responding to a coordinated cyber attack across Allied bases in the Pacific, I spoke for the first time in front of the group. My analysis was direct, strategic, quietly brutal. When I finished, no one said a word for a full 10 seconds. Then Major Blake Turner, Army, West Point, 3rd generation, leaned back in his chair and said, "Damn, she's not just here for the photo op." There were a few chuckles. Not mocking, almost respect. I didn't smile, but I didn't lower my eyes either. Over the next weeks, something shifted. I wasn't embraced. This wasn't a group that hugged, but I was heard. When I spoke, people listened. When I pushed back, no one tried to silence me. Rains was right. It was a different kind of war, but it was still war. One night, after a classified roundtable, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass doors of the operations building. I looked older, sharper. Not because of age, but because everything soft had been burned away. I touched the spot on my face where Lena had hit me. It was long healed, but I could still feel the shape of it. Not the pain. The moment. Behind me, a voice. "You stayed standing." I turned. Rains again. Not in uniform. Civilian jacket. Quiet hands. Watching me the way people watch fires from a safe distance. I didn't think I'd see you here, I said. I rotate through the program. Observer status. Of course you do. He stepped closer. Not too close. Word is, your briefing's being circulated up the chain. I raised an eyebrow. Which chain? He smiled, a rare expression on his face. The one above all of them. I didn't answer. He hesitated, then said quietly, Lena's trying. That's something. I froze. You talked to her? He didn't blink. She reached out, wanted to understand what it's like to love a ghost. I turned away, throat tight. I'm not a ghost. No, he said. But you are damn hard to follow. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't have to. We stood there in the dark, the base lights glowing behind us, the hum of distant helicopters filling the air like a lullaby for people who forgot how to sleep. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if Lena and I would ever speak face to face again. I didn't know why Captain Rains had lied for me, or what debt he thought he owed. I didn't know if this program would launch my career, or just bury me deeper in a system that feeds on resilience. But I did know one thing. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. I stood outside the Pentagon in a storm gray suit, not a uniform. No ribbons, no stripes. Just a plain security badge clipped to my belt. Clearance level far higher than anything I'd worn before. Inside those walls, decisions were made that bent the direction of nations. I was about to walk through them not as a soldier, but as a strategist. A voice in the room, a chair at the table. I didn't even tell anyone I was coming. They told me. 3 weeks earlier, I'd finished the strategic leadership program with top evaluations and a final presentation that had apparently made its way through 4 different departments. I only knew this because a colonel I'd never met shook my hand and said, "They'll remember your name after this." I didn't care about that. What I cared about, what I couldn't stop thinking about, was the letter that came 2 days after the program ended. Handwritten. Slightly wrinkled. The handwriting wasn't Lena's. It was our mother's. I know I never said the things you needed to hear. I didn't know how to love you without controlling you. I only saw what you left. I didn't see what you were carrying. I read it sitting on the floor in my kitchen, legs crossed like I was 12 years old again. The letter smelled faintly of the cedar drawers she always kept lavender in. A memory I hadn't visited in years. Your sister told me what happened. She told me about the slap. I didn't raise you to let someone hit you, but I also didn't raise you to be afraid of love. I hope you forgive me for both. No signature, just a pressed violet tucked inside the fold. Dry and delicate. I hadn't cried. Not then. Not yet. Instead, I got up, got dressed, and said yes to the offer waiting in my inbox. And now, here I was, on the edge of a new chapter I hadn't planned for, hadn't asked for, but somehow deserved. Not because I was flawless, but because I was finally real. Inside the briefing room, the lights were low, the air cold. 3 men and 1 woman sat at a curved table, files open in front of them. High-level advisors, joint chiefs, people who'd never once heard my voice. Until today. I introduced myself clearly, calmly. No title, no apology. I didn't flinch when one of them asked about the incident on the base. They didn't say the word slap, but it hung in the air between syllables. She's my sister, I said simply. It wasn't the first time she hurt me, but it was the first time I didn't hide it. No one spoke for a beat. Then one of them, a woman from Homeland, gave a single, quiet nod. That was it. The moment turned. The meeting continued. Plans. Risks. Red lines. They asked what I would do if a Pacific ally collapsed from within. I laid out options that weren't from a textbook, but from years of seeing what desperation really looks like in villages, on warships, in families. When I finished, one of them said, "You're not like the others we've had in here." "I hope not," I replied. Afterward, I walked the long corridor out into the light. The sun had broken through. I wasn't used to that. Light after shadow. It made everything sharper, too honest. At the far end of the courtyard, I saw a familiar figure leaning against the concrete wall. Rains. In civilian clothes again, arms crossed, his posture as unreadable as ever. "I thought you were halfway to Langley," I said as I approached. "I was." "Changed your mind?" "No," he said. "I just wanted to see what a woman looks like when she takes back her own story." He wasn't smiling, but his eyes had softened. "I don't owe you anything, you know," I said. He nodded. "That's why you're worth showing up for." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Not between us. He had offered me protection when no one else did. But it was never about him. It was about what I became when no one protected me anymore. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I finally let myself sit with everything: the scar on my leg, the letter from my mother, the silence from Lena that now felt like peace, not punishment. I stood in front of the mirror, not to fix anything, but to see clearly. The woman staring back wasn't the girl who ran, or the soldier who obeyed, or the sister who stayed silent. She was all of them, and none of them. I touched my own reflection. I'm still here. I'm still standing. Not because the world let me, but because it couldn't stop me. Life doesn't always fall apart in explosions. Sometimes it cracks quietly, in a ceremony, in a sentence, in a single moment when someone you love forgets how to love you back. I've learned that strength isn't just medals or rank. It's standing your ground when everything in you wants to run. It's choosing dignity over revenge. And most of all, it's staying human, even when it hurts. If you're still watching, thank you. This was my story, but it could be anyone's, because betrayal doesn't care what uniform you wear, and healing doesn't follow orders. So if this meant something to you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. On this channel, we tell true-to-life stories about real people, people who've faced pain, loss, and sometimes the hardest part of all, forgiveness. Because no matter how broken things get, sometimes just standing back up is the bravest thing you'll ever do.